welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Hey, thanks for being with us. It's always a pleasure to have you joining us, along with our guests. And today our guest is Acharya Shunya. She's the author of Sovereign Self, Claim Your Inner Joy and Freedom with the Empowering Wisdom of the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. And we want to thank you so much for joining us again. This is the second time you've been on the program, and I love having you here. The first time we had the opportunity to first meet and have a wonderful conversation, and I'm going, I have to have this beautiful woman back again to talk about these wonderful writings, these ancient wisdom teachings, and her experiences. Thanks again for joining us.
Oh, it's always such a wonderful opportunity to chat with you. We always find something deep to dig into. Thank you for having me back.
And digging deep is what we do want to do, because you have been in the depths of the ancient wisdom teachings, of the ancient ways, if you will, and you were born and raised, if you will, in those ancient ways. Now, would it be inappropriate to refer to you as a yogini or a guruji or what? And again, or master. Is there an appropriate title that befits you? I know that for all of us, and myself included, I want to do what I can to stay humble, to be a servant, and a servant must be humble. That's one of the reasons I have problems with politicians, regardless of country, is they think that they own that position that they've been elected to, and they stay there far longer than they have any business staying. They're supposed to be servants of the people. So let me ask you, what best describes Acharya Shunya?
Well, Shunya is my name. Acharya is my title, which comes from one who leads not only through their talking, which can be a lot of bragging, but their life, their lifestyle, their behaviors, put them as a leader of their lineage or a leader of a certain path. And guru is something that I am to some people, not all, but that's between me and them. So I don't go about the world saying, call me Guruji, because then that's like assuming that I am the leader or the spiritual teacher of a certain person. So guru is a word thrown around a lot in the pop culture of spirituality, including like the new, it's an evolution from India, and it's taken over the world, and there are good gurus and bad gurus and questionable gurus and worthy gurus. But the guru was always a personal relationship between a disciple and the teacher, and not a generic title. Acharya was the title that has to be achieved over minimum 12 years of ongoing study under another Acharya. And I managed to have 14 years in with my Acharya, my teacher. And that's how I became the lineage holder, probably the first female lineage holder in a 2,000-year-old lineage from India.
So Acharya is teacher, is that right?
Acharya is chief teacher.
Chief
leader.
teacher, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Shunya, I will refer to you in that fashion. I was joking around with a dear friend of mine once. We were just chatting, and I said, I sent off a note, an email once, and they asked me, this question about, my title. And I said, well, how about Oracle? Just call me an Oracle. And she got the biggest, and I did too, the biggest laugh out of that. It's like, I'm no Oracle, let me tell you. I'm trying to find answers just like everyone else. So I'm very excited to have the opportunity to speak with you again, and to encourage our listeners to find out more about who you are. We'll be giving your website here in just a few moments, but let's talk a little bit about your lineage, which is in a fashion, it's rather prestigious from maybe the Western perspective. Oh my gosh, she's the head of a lineage that goes back How many years?
We have traced our ancestry to 2,000 years of Indian history. Yeah, in
Wow.
India, that's not abnormal to go back that far.
Right. And I mean, I suppose one could say from a standpoint of genetics or DNA ancestry that we all go back thousands and thousands of years back to, if you choose to believe the creation story as true, we go back to Adam and Eve. I mean, we all come from that, that place wherever that is. Um, let's talk a little bit, first of all, about that aspect of ancestry. Now, from your perspective, from the teachings, as we've described in the title of the book, the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita, where where do we as human beings, that particular species on the planet, where do we come from?
It's interesting that the Vedas never tried to give us anything to believe in. They didn't give us like, well, um, anything that was believable to some and not believable to some.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably one of the reasons I really like this approach. They mostly said we don't know, and I kind of like that. In fact, they said that before everything existed, there was that, and even before the gods existed, there was that, and they called it pure consciousness, which breathed without breath. So it was not an anthropomorphic figure that's popular in Hindu gods today. It was more like a consciousness and awareness, and it feels like this consciousness is shared by all beings wearing different clothes. So it's really one beingness that is present in you, me, and all of us, of different bodies, colors, cultures, and we are free to have and adore that one spiritual cause, substance, intelligence in the form of any god we please. And that's why sometimes the Vedic people, or the people, the Hindus, which is the religion most closely associated with the Vedic wisdom that I teach, are sometimes mocked for having like 840 million gods, like they couldn't like get their act together. But they said, where is the sacred consciousness? Not there. And so there are chants in the original text called the Vedas to say, look at the god in the pebbles, look at the god in the river, look at the god in the ants, look at the god. So it's like sacred consciousness, and the seers were drunk with seeing divinity in every eye. But they never really said that, well, this is how you came, but they said, well, you are trapped, in the sense that you're trapped in your own mind, in your own desires, and in your own compulsions to look within and find that awareness that's going to give you all the answers. So it's a tradition that makes you seek the answer from within.
Well, that is very appropriate here in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, as we've been promoting, to encourage people to do just that, to go within, not only to find the answers to their questions. And I've always made it rather clear that one will go within themselves and find the answers for themselves. It's not likely you're going to find answers for your husband, your wife, your children, et cetera, although you will be guided in ways to relate with them, and different paths that you might take. You'll find a fork in the road, and if you listen to that still small voice, it'll tell you, go off this way, or no, go off this way. And that's real important. But also to find the stillness, to find the quiet, to find the peace, and if you will, the bliss, I suppose, that we're all, I think, on that internal level, we're all craving, aren't we?
We're craving essentially a wholeness. And we crave wholeness because according to the Vedas, we have something to do with wholeness. So they give us hints. You crave for peace because you come from peace, you are peace.
Mm-hmm.
You crave abundance, like we crave money, and we crave things and perfumes and scents and clothes, because essentially we come from infinite abundance. So they say that, yeah, you can wear clothes and you can get a job and you can start a family to experience love or the transaction of it, but you are radical love and you are radical abundance. And that's the fun part. And that's what I bring out in my book, Sovereign Self, that the autonomy or the authority of finding what you desire or what you crave, as you said, is to be found within. And at some point, we have to calm down this grasping behavior in the world or be in it. Like, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have students worldwide, and I have things I'm doing. If you look at my calendar, it's really busy. Even today, right after this radio show, I have a couple more things lined up. And I'm sure you do too. But
Mm,
at some point, we need to know that that's the outer, and those are the things that keep me occupied. But for my love, self-love, for my fullness, for my wholeness, for my permissions, for my creativity, I have to have a relationship with my own true essence. It's invisible, but it's undeniable.
yeah.
And that's where the fun begins. Like, a long time ago, when I just knew this theoretically, I was kind of like, I could talk about it, but I was still kind of needy. Richard. And needy people put people off. So I couldn't really attract what I wanted. And a lot of that attraction stuff happens when you're really needy. So you're more like repelling things. But through this Vedic approach of finding and dwelling in yourself, which is really whole and non needy, I found that things are just manifesting around me. And I'm still not necessarily overexcited or overrelated. I'm like, oh, cool. So it's a cool state of affairs for me.
Well, and I can relate to that too, because and actually a very good example of that, as of our conversation, last night I was thinking about this latch that I was going to put onto my wife's greenhouse. We just finished building this beautiful redwood greenhouse,
Oh,
and uh, we had there were these four left. I don't want to say leftover pieces of wood. Maybe this is what they were designed for. I don't know. All I know is there they were. These little pieces had a little hole in it and so forth. And I thought, this might work good as a latch to hold the door closed. Now, originally I had bought one of these metal hooks with an eye bolt and blah, blah, blah. Well, I still had two of those pieces of wood left. And I thought, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to put that together. And it was like, it just flowed. And we had already done it on the outside of the greenhouse to hold the door open. It's one of those double Dutch doors. And so the top half can stay open and the bottom half closed. And we wanted to make sure that the top half didn't swing closed, with a breeze or something. Not that it would lock or anything, but it would slam into the wall. So anyway, I just went out there, and this is one of the aspects of intuition, of listening to that still small voice or being prompted. You, in a manner of speaking, you have to be in motion. You really do. And I was in motion. I was moving. I had the materials in my hand, and it was like things just came together. They just happened. When I used to produce programs back 35, 40 years ago, and this was for a Christian radio station, and they would bring in these 45s, they'd bring in cassette, they bring all the materials in to create a program. I says, have you timed any of this out? And they would say, no. I said, okay, well, that's fine. Their program was supposed to be maybe 15 minutes, right? So we started to create, we started to put things together, we started to record. And when it was all over, we went back and timed it. It was 15 minutes. I didn't plan it that way. But again, because I was in motion and my intent was to serve the programmer, the client, if you will, the pastor, the minister, whoever it was. And my focus wasn't on their content. That's their business. Okay. My business was to make sure that the message that they wanted to put out there was heard, was understood, and that there were no distractions, so that whoever was listening could make up their own mind without being distracted by, say, noises that say, oh, I don't like this message because I can barely understand it. Well, now they haven't heard what this person has said. And I think that it's important for us to be able to do that. And we all have, like James Redfield in his book Celestine Prophecy talks about, how we have messages for each other. But if there are distractions, then people will miss the message, or you won't be able to get the message out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and this flow or the zone or
Mm-hmm.
being in movement, like you had the other padlock ready,
Mm-hmm.
but then you organically, intuitively found another way of doing it your way, the soul's way.
The soul's way.
And
Yeah.
this is the exciting part. It's like a simple example, but it shows that how when we're not tuned in, we are scripted,
Yeah.
and society tells us that this is what the padlock looks like, or this is how you have to fret and fume and put like a program together and stress over the 15-minute, or you could be whistling your way through it and finding your way through it, and you find that the universe orchestrates it in such a way that you have a beautiful lock on your, sounds like a beautiful
Oh,
house,
yeah.
like a little red cabin you've created, and a beautiful show. And this listening to this inner voice is like a big thing now, and it's like all over spirituality. But this was the path of the Vedas. This was the path of turning you inwards and finding your inner guru. And the outer guru didn't ask you to worship them as God, which is like so not what the original teachings are about. The outer guru was more like a consultant, a friend, who said, I found my inner bliss and peace and bigness and intuition, and here's how you can do it too. And here are the teachings that don't box you, but help you actually unbox yourself. But not spill all over because you're unboxed and but you're
Mm-hmm.
you're beautifully poised between being in the world and not being in the world, but
Yeah.
being within you.
I think
Yeah.
there's a wonderful biblical phrase, in the world and not of it, as it were. Now,
Beautiful.
let me ask you, in terms of your book, which I'm holding up to those people watching on YouTube, Sovereign Self, how was the flow with creating this work?
Oh, it's been written for me by my soul or by the super soul or God, Krishna, Jesus, Buddha. They all came together. I I've been receiving letters from all over the world saying I had a problem, and then I prayed to the book, and then I just opened it and it opened to the right page, and etc. etc. And I wanted to tell them, and I hope they hear it because I can't write all these letters back. But the whole purpose of writing the book was not to make it a bestseller that it is, or be like an author. My desire was this constant prayer that as I have been rescued from my own shadow, from my own doubts, from my own self-abandonment in a spiritual sense, may others find something in it. So it's been written for all people of all cultures, and it's going to strengthen them in their religious path or their agnostic, atheistic path. It doesn't matter because they're going to find something palpably true within them. And as for the flow, I didn't push it. So it took me 3 years. I thought I'd be done in a year, but it took me three. I enjoyed the process. And now I've forgotten how I wrote it. It just, it's,
Which
it's
is
like, did I write this? It's like,
which,
okay.
in a manner of speaking, is probably just fine, because when you go to write your next book, whenever that will be, you're not going to be hampered by, okay, in the last book, I did it this way. And you're
No.
going to just allow the flow to come. I want to ask
Yeah,
you a
if my
little.
brain was too involved, I'd remember every word, but it was my heart. It's
Exactly.
done. It's done. Yeah.
Now, this to me is very important. Chapter 8, for example, entitled Guru, Recognizing a True Teacher. Now, from a biblical standpoint, it talks about how there will always be false teachers or prophets, et cetera, et cetera. How does one, and I have myself not, I haven't been a follower of just one. Okay. Kind of like that old Lay's potato chip commercial. You can only eat just one. You can only follow just one, they say. But I am not tied to the messenger And as the Baha'is say, Baha'u'llah said, if you recognize, if you will, and accept one of the messengers of God, you accept them all. If you reject one of them, you reject them all. And I would only modify that to say, to refer more to the message. That what I find in my life is, it's not the personality. This is, to me, the problem, especially here in the United States with our politics. We get so tied up with a personality and an individual that we can't let them go. And there are people who don't want to let certain individuals go, and they want to make sure they stay there for year after year after year after year. And it's like, no, 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 no. You go there, you serve, and you move on. It's your message. It's your intent, if you will. That's, to me, what's so important, the intent of the messengers. What is your, in chapter 8, as I read the title there, how does one begin the process, not only of finding a true teacher, but also of not getting, if I may use the term, bogged down in the personality and staying focused on the message?
I'm going to answer a great question, and I'm going to respond in two parts. One part is one teacher versus many. So there was a Vedic seeker known as Dattatreya. He lived thousands of years ago, but he's mentioned, and his story is mentioned in our literature, which India being pretty ancient, the teachings get conveyed generation to generation orally and in written form. And Dattatreya had 24 gurus, which included humans, such as a young unmarried girl, a child. He learned from a child. He learned from a dancing girl, which are usually looked down upon, like in a brothel. And he found her to be a teacher. And then he learned from a pigeon, and he learned from honey gathering bees. So he kept drawing teachings from even earth, water, air, fire, sky, the five elements, and the moon, and the sun, and the python, and so on and on it goes. And I talk about these stories. It's not in my book, but I talk about it in my other courses and things. But in the Vedic tradition, when you're looking at the scriptures, when you're looking at the deeper teachings of the mind and how to manage your thoughts, and how to believe in, how to change your emotions from those that pull you down, or those that are delusional, to real, so that you don't suppress them, but then you ascend and experience the emotion of peace and joy too. Then you might want to work with 1 to 3 teachers, and then you might find that there is one teacher, more like a master, who can teach you academic stuff, and can also help you emotion and mind management, like you would work with a therapist. You won't work with 5 therapists at the same time, or you would work with one physician to handle your stuff. So it's like when you're in the real deep journey. And the beautiful part is that the Vedas even say that you might not need a physical teacher or one teacher, because you may have done that in another lifetime. So they give you all these options, but then they do say, look, be wary of false teachers, because sometimes the ego can pretend. And even these false teachers are not evil. It's not like they're set out to make a fool out of you. There might be a few con people, but a lot of false teachers truly believe in their authenticity. They're good intention, but they are deluded by their own ego, which is saying, I'm awake, look at me, I wrote a bestseller, and look at me, I have an aura and I have a photo to prove it. It's all good intention, except that they are kind of anxious at bedtime, and they may not lead you home to your inner being.
And I'm going to use this example because I think it's appropriate for what you just said about individuals and the shall we say, the false prophets, the false teachers. I am not accusing this individual of being a false teacher, but what was so fascinating was that one of his former supporters came out and said that this individual does not lie. He doesn't lie. He doesn't lie because in his world, it's the truth. So from his perspective, he's not lying. But from ours and many, many other people who have different perspectives, no, he's lying. Well, when you start taking a look at it from that individual's perspective of he isn't lying, she isn't lying, it's from their view of the world, from where they are coming from, they believe it. For them, it's true. And when you do that, it almost diffuses, at least I think so, the whole, all of that energy around the combativeness. There's another biblical passage that says, resist not evil. In other words, don't resist evil. Now, that doesn't mean you give into it. This is the way I interpret that. Evil is this giant wall, this brick wall. It's as high as you can think of. It's as long on both directions as you can think of, and it goes into the ground as far as you can think of. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. And you can't go through it. So what do? You turn around and you walk away. Why expend your energy fighting this wall when you could be doing so many other wonderful things? And I encourage people, that's one of the things I encourage people to do, is to go out, stop fighting, and start living your life, finding your life's purpose, and putting energies into that. It's like with this greenhouse. I could have told my wife over and over again, no, they're way too expensive. In other words, I could give her every reason in the book not to. But I'm going, wait a minute, this is her dream. This is what she wants. And I want to help her to fulfill that dream of getting another greenhouse. We had one back in Phoenix. We couldn't bring it with us. And the next thing you know, I said, I know it's taken a long time. I'm just asking you to be patient. I'm not saying no. Okay. I'm saying we need to be patient. And eventually the universe made a way, and voila, here we are, without any stress, without any frustration, without any injuries. I might add that. No injuries in the building of the greenhouse. But
see, that's brilliant what the Bible said, and the Vedas are echoing something similar, because if you get too entangled with fixing the evil, some of it comes on you and you lose your lifetime, this precious humanhood, where you could be evoking your inner light and your inner growth.
yeah.
And so we can be busy pointing fingers. And at the same time, a knowledge of the false prophet or the false teacher, just enough knowledge to keep you off of harm's way, out of harm's way. And that is enough. And that's why I dedicated a whole chapter. I'm so proud of my publisher, Sounds True, for insisting I have it in there. And it's written with kindness, more like information, not like lambasting the evil, because the evil are ignorant and they're doing their own thing, like the wall, and they're gonna find their salvation at some point. In the meantime, here's how you can be safe. And if you still wanted to benefit from some teacher or some tradition, here is how. And what does surrender mean? Surrender doesn't mean surrendering your sexual organs to the teacher. Surrendering does not mean surrendering your esteem. It means surrendering your ignorance. And being like, just like if you were to go to a math professor to learn math, you have to surrender your ignorance. At some point, you have to stop being a know-it-all and learn from the teacher. In the same way, you might want to just give it a little time to see. And the best way is if the teacher makes you more proud of your being and more full, almost, more small. And that's a good way to know, who's the real teacher.
I interviewed a gentleman by the name of John Noe, Christian author, wrote a book called The Apocalypse Conspiracy. And basically, from his perspective, he had felt back, and this was back in the late 80s, that Christendom had been sold a bill of goods. They'd been lied to, basically. And so what he did was he took his Strong's Concordance, and then he took his version of the Bible, and he started going through certain passages that just didn't make any sense to him from what the ministers and pastors and the commentaries were saying. They just didn't make any sense. And the long and the short of it is, and this is summing up his book, that what he found for himself was that Christianity is not an external process. It's all internal. Yes, it has ramifications for the external world, but as a believer, as a follower of that philosophy, it's internal. And as I read his book, and at that time it was the first book I'd been interviewing for a number of years before that, but it was the first one I actually read cover to cover. And I said, you know what? I like what he has to say, but I don't want to be telling people, well, John Noe said this and John Noe said that. No. Any more than you want anybody to say, well, Shunya said this and Shunya said that. I took my concordance and I took my different versions of the Bible. And then I went through his book and I found those passages he researched, and I researched them for myself. And I made his information my primary source information. Now, of course, we have to come to some agreement that the concordance, Bible concordance, and the versions of the Bible that I was looking at, we're going to accept for the sake of argument that they're okay. They're good. They're authentic, if you will. Okay. They're valid, I guess is the best word to put. And once I've done that, then I can begin the research, and now that becomes mine, which I now can share with other people. But I don't want them to say, well, but Richard said this and Richard said that and Richard said the no. I want you to investigate. And I have a feeling you feel the same way, that yes, you wrote this wonderful book and it's a little thick in one sense, but it's got some great information. But by the same token, you want people, I don't know if you've ever read Stranger in a Strange Land, science fiction story about a man from Mars. Well, there's a word in there that I found out, and I only found it in that book. And the word is grok, to grok, which means, as I interpret it from the book, it means to assimilate into every subatomic particle of your being. So take Shunya's book and whatever resonates with you and assimilate it. And if it resonates and it's true for you, then make it a part of who you are. If it doesn't resonate, don't do anything with it.
Don't.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk to us about the importance of don't take the politicians or the ministers or the teachers or whatever authority, or your doctor for that matter. His word is not, if you want to use the word gospel, I'm not sure what the breakdown of the Bhagavad Gita is as far as that's concerned, book, chapter, verse, as being true. Test it, check it out. Isn't that what these writings talk about, and even what you talk about?
Yes, and what supports me in this endeavor to be offering this knowledge to the world is because the Vedas describe what truth really means. And they said, for it to be truth, it has, it can't just be one person's truth. Like, I believe in the truth and now I just wrote it up and I'm giving it to you.
Mm-hmm.
If it's truth, then it has to be a truth for you too. And it has to be a truth for all eras and all times. So, for example, when we say walk away from the wall of evil, it's not just like it was pertaining to when Jesus spoke those words.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, the teachings of Krishna, why people have found them useful and universal is because they address the beingness, the existential pain that all humans have, not just, a couple of people who live on this side of the river.
Yeah.
And eat vegetarian cuisine, it's, or only have heterosexual relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's for all people in all times, and it addresses the psyche and how we get blindsided by our own false beliefs in how, like, our fullness lies outside.
Yeah.
And so that is why I wrote the book, and that should be the parameter with which I would like the readers to keep reading, because what I think is a great truth should kind of talk to them too. Otherwise, fold it away. Exactly.
Fold it up and put it back on a shelf, and maybe come back later. It's what I talk to.
It looks pretty. It has a red, it looked nice in your library.
Absolutely. Hey, I like it on my bookshelf. Of course, It's not doing much good just sitting on the bookshelf, getting dust on it. But I'll get to it. I will eventually. I mean, there are so many classics that I would love to read. I haven't read yet, but I'm so thankful now for Audible. I'm sure the books were still available when I was listening to them through Recordings for the Blind and Talking Books for the Blind back in the 60s, 70s. when I was going to school. But with Audible now, I mean, it's a big deal, and I have Ulysses on my Audible in my library there. I have the Course in Miracles. I have the Autobiography of a Yogi, which is my primer, my metaphysical primer that I started reading, I think, when I was 16, 17 years old. That officially started me on my search. I want to talk more about one of the other chapters in here, but first I want to remind our listeners, as I've already shown you the book, and of course you can see it as we are talking here on YouTube, as well as SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, and many other locations, as well as the radio broadcasts on this fine station at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday mornings, and Monday mornings at 1 a.m. That's Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And we also encourage you to go to our guest website. Our guest website today, it is on Acharya Shunya, AcharyAChunya.com. And you can find out more about how you can access your spiritual birthright of freedom, wholeness, and joy through the perennial wisdom of yoga's ancient spiritual texts. I want to talk, I don't want to forget this, but I also don't want to forget what I was just thinking here. I want to talk about chapter 20, Atma Shakti, bringing soul power to relationships. But before I do that, I want to ask you about this concept that in the West, in my perspective, in my humble opinion, has been distorted. When you talk about accessing your spiritual birthright of freedom, okay, you go on to say wholeness and joy through blah, blah, blah. What is meant? What is this freedom? Is this what we have here in the States in the First Amendment to the Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, where it says we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, these inalienable rights? Or is it something different?
It is close, but it is definitely different, because the freedom I'm talking about is a spiritually sourced freedom to be or become what you are meant to be, to change agreements that you may have made with others when you didn't know better, to reclaim yourself in case you scattered your energy, your love, your beliefs away, to untangle from societal conditioning, and if I may say so, even religious dogma. To whatever religion you come from, there is the pure part of the religion and then the dogma promoted by humans. So you want to pull away from all of that, and that freedom is our birthright to invent and reinvent ourselves, and to change that basic paradigm of not being able to change because we are either born into, or there is karma, or there is conditioning, or there is expectation and obligations, or there is a self-forgetfulness according to the Vedas. And so we feel we're just this body that is of a certain age, and there is a mind which is obscured from the light. And so now this is it. This web of deceits and sorrows and aging and betrayal and death and decay is my life. But then by reading this book and contemplating and meditating and going through those teachings, the promise is that, say you were to finish the book, you would definitely feel lighter, and your relationship with a cup of coffee may change. Your relationship with a toxic person may change, where you don't have to murder them or run away from them.
Please.
But you somehow are able to not make them have any influence in your life. Yeah. And I have lived this knowledge. I have been through, I'm a human. Every teacher is a human first. And so it took me my 54th year to publish it. Though I became a lineage holder at 24, it took me those extra decades to live this knowledge, share it with the world in my own way, where I saw changes, and then put it in my book, because this is not only ancient knowledge, but like you said just earlier, I had to verify it in the laboratory of my own life,
I like that.
I mean, is the Gita just something handed down to me as a scripture, or is it what it's called a psychology manual for all humans who want to lead conscious lives? So then when I applied those teachings, I became free. So the book is full of examples of my students from the Western world, and not even Indian, not even Hindu, not
Hmm.
even who've grown up with the Bhagavad Gita. They may have grown up with all other types of expectations and understandings.
Yeah.
And when they benefited too, I knew that I'm onto something. And the book Sovereign Self was born.
Sovereign Self's the title of the book. My guest is Acharya Shunya. Shunya is my guest, and we're talking about her book, and it's having to do with claiming your inner joy and freedom with the empowered wisdom of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. We're going to talk a little bit here in just a moment about the Atma Shakti. It is bringing soul power to relationships, which you actually started to allude to there in your description in terms of this whole aspect of freedom. And it's one of those things that, from the Western perspective, and especially here in the United States, and again, my observations, I put this, and I remind people all the time, I don't put any of this on the rest of society or on anybody else. It's just where I'm coming from today. Tomorrow could change because I'm meeting people like you and others who are giving me insights into things that I used to believe I don't. I've let those go. Things that I now know, that I've let other things that I used to know that didn't make sense. And it was like when I worked for the Christian station, I would ask questions, and the answers that I would get didn't make any sense. It's just totally illogical. But one of the things you said in terms of this self-awareness and the truth and what have you is best epitomized by a conversation I had with a Christian musician by the name of John Fisher. I talk with a lot. No, I'm not going there. John Fisher. And he and I were chatting, and he was living in New England now. And he grew up in what's called the Jesus movement of the 70s as a kid growing up. And he said that one day, we were talking about one of his books and as well as his music, and beautiful voice this man has. And he says, I was sitting here, and it was fall, and the leaves were turning, and they were falling off the trees and coming to the ground. And I began to ponder this. And I thought, I was so impressed with his pondering. He said, I began to ask myself, is what I believe what I was taught or told to believe, or what I truly believe from within that matches my own individual personal values and mores and ethics, etc.? Because in spite of where we are born, and you would probably attest to this, Shunya, we as individuals always have that, shall we call it, an inner compass that has nothing to do with the outer dogma and doctrine that is poured upon us as we grow up. That we know intuitively that what they're telling us doesn't make any sense, or no, that's not right. That doesn't feel right, et cetera, et cetera. And he began to question. That was the pondering. Is this mine, or is this what they told me is mine? And I was so impressed by that. And one final thought, and I'll have you expound on this. Agnosticism, to me, regardless of whatever philosophy you might be following, is the most honest position to take. I don't know. The late Larry King, who I tried getting an interview with over and over again, and unfortunately did not, but I loved listening to his radio broadcasts back in the 80s when he would talk, people would ask him about his religious beliefs. And he says, I'm an agnostic because I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about that aspect of who we are, what's inside of us, the core that guides us. And sometimes we don't listen, we don't feel it, we don't follow it, and we buy into all of these other things that come our way.
Yeah, and that is true. And this inner compass is known in the Vedas and Buddhism as Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And dharma literally doesn't mean religion. It comes from the root Sanskrit word dri, which means that which sustains you and the entire universe. So there is an inner compass of compassion, love, nonviolence, truth, honesty, the younger looking after the older, wanting and yearning to be part of something real, and supporting that. The problem begins when the compass is clouded,
Mm-hmm.
and ethics have become submerged under selfishness and self-centeredness and self-absorption. And that is where the role of your podcast or my teaching comes in, or and like-minded people, where we try to, we don't say we are going to be the compass for you, but we say, look, here, like you say, well, here are all these teachers, or I say, well, here is this tradition. It has helped me connect with my inner compass.
Mm-hmm.
So traditions and paths and teachers and religions, and ultimately all religions, I have to say that at a core, are trying to remind us of that compass again,
Yes.
at their core.
Mm-hmm.
And this includes all religions.
Yes.
And so what I want to applaud is the human beings wanting to honor that compass, uphold it, and re-remember it if we've forgotten it. Now, how much dogma comes with it is cultural, packaged, based on the era and the cosmos, and our good or bad luck in finding the more authentic source or the right source. But once your inner compass, your inner knowingness has become awakened, then, like I mentioned, the case of Dattatreya, the trees were teaching him, the moon was teaching him. He didn't need no book. And as your friend said, he sat there with the leaves falling and he wondered which voice to trust. And probably that was the beginning of a U-turn of that soul.
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful,
Oh,
this journey that
I
we can have as humans.
yeah, it's one of the things that has always intrigued me, excited me, and given me hope for the future as I was growing in this particular business of broadcasting back in the 80s and 90s, was when I would come across people who would say, they would put the label on, yes, I'm a Christian, I'm a Bible believer, I'm an evangelical, I'm a Pentecostal, Baptist, whatever the label. And then they would share with me their perspective. Okay. They would share with me their observations, their experiences, in some instances, experiences that you couldn't find word for word in the Bible, Old or New Testament. And yet they had them. And I would never ever challenge them saying, well, if it's not in the Bible, that's impossible. You could not have had that experience. Well, the reality is, oh, yes, you can, because not everything is contained within the walls of the book, if you will, okay, or in the pages of the book, in the print. And I even interviewed on this program, Tell Me Your Story, a fundamentalist evangelical Christian gentleman who does this intentionally, out of body experience. I says, where in the Bible does it say you can do that? He says, I haven't found it. And I said, have you ever not wanted to come back? He says, no, I just love the experience. It's so uplifting. It's so exciting. It's so cool, if you will. And I'm just sitting here going, wow, people are, and that's why I loved reading, for example, the Edgar Cayce books as one example, because here was a Christian who had this philosophy in his conscious, ego-centered personality. And yet he still did the channeling of these messages that we now have in print. And that is what not only gives me hope, but is encouraging for others who are shy, who even are afraid to quote unquote come out and share their experiences, even to the extent, Shunya, where they claim that they have been in the presence thereof or abducted by extraterrestrials, as we call them, aliens, if you will. Maybe, or for example, the story of Fatima and Lourdes. I've seen this movie twice now of Lourdes Fatima rather, of the three children. I remember reading the story years ago when I was producing a program called the Radio Family Rosary Program. And what really struck me was the way that the adults treated the children early on until the miracles started to happen and the adults could see what was happening and they realized, oh, the kids weren't lying. They were telling the truth.
Truth.
Talk to us, if you would, if you can, about your own personal, if spiritual, or even maybe a better word is mystical experiences. Have you had those?
Yes, I have. And fortunately, the yogic tradition that I come from um, allows for that and talks about it. But I want to share something on what you said. It's really fascinating that the Vedas kind of turn around and say that if at the end of their life all you're saying is Veda, 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 Veda is these like verses, ancient verses of wisdom, like the Bhagavad Gita and all, they're part of the Vedas, then you just know the words, you've not lived it. At some point, you have to get off the boat and swim yourself.
I like that.
And I really love that permission. And so you'll find all these articulate teachers from India who are like chanting away and all that. And I just want to live that one knowledge, one verse, one word, you know. So I chose to not be just oriented by the text, but more go into the wisdom. And it itself says, don't hold on to the book, don't hold on to us, because this is only like a instrument. You have to, we're helping you find you, and that goes beyond words. And as for mystical experiences, uh, I've had a few profound ones, which I'd rather not talk about. But I don't talk about them because they are so, yeah.
They're personal.
Um, I haven't spent time sharing them in the public like some people do, and it's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
I have a public persona where I'm a teacher and an advisor to the government of India on yoga, Ayurveda, and I have and I have students and I teach courses, and then I have a yogini inside me that is personal and quiet and withdrawn. So,
Mm.
but I can say this much. I'm not offended by the question because, in fact, it's so profound that I haven't still meditated on the words to explain what happened to me and what occurred to me and how I have seen that there is more to me than just this being, and that I've had non-dual experiences that has left me in a state of love for all beings and all people. And I want to tell you that I don't know about any labels on you, but I experience your universal love. So traditions, Christian, Vedic, Buddhist, Sikh, Jain, those are just our starting pathways,
Yeah.
but they all lead us to this common space of radical oneness, love, compassion, embrace, acceptance. Then I can recognize a fellow kinship, someone who's there,
Mm-hmm.
and so bows to you too.
Thank you. And I'm going to phrase it this way only because it's the best way for me to phrase it. I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things, and I say this with all due respect to other people who have this philosophy, that if in fact on my departure from this world, there is a day of judgment, and I stand before God Almighty, okay, and that were to happen, I would have basically two responses. One would follow the other. The first response would be, "Hi there, how you doing? You know, I did the very best with the life that I did the very best with the life that you gave me. I'm appreciative. Thank you, thank you, thank you. However, if I don't measure up, to whatever standards were there that I should have done, I should have believed, I should have followed, et cetera, et cetera. Well, honestly, there is nothing I can do about that because you're going to do with me what you will. However, number two is, you are omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. You knew from the very beginning of the creation of the universe that I was going to be living the life I lived. Okay? Now, I'm not talking predestination. We won't go into that. But in the final analysis of my life as an eternal being, spending it in heaven or hell, as the philosophy teaches, this is on you, God, not on me, because you are the one who set all of this in motion. And again, nothing I can do about it. You're going to do with me what you will. I'm just saying. Okay?
I so love it. I so love it. I so love it. And when I was growing up, I had to deal with a lot of like karma scare. Like, you're going to do this, you're going to have that. I'm like, no, this is not on me. So I'm laughing because I found myself bold and tall saying, if I mess up, it's me and God messing up.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do something great, it's me and God doing it. So that keeps my ego in check.
There you go.
And that's that. And so there's been this lightheartedness in being a human who can make mistakes and still not have this like holy shame,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also use this analogy that I tell the story like this. There is this individual, male or female, doesn't matter. They're walking in this beautiful meadow, blue skies, maybe a few white clouds floating through the skies, but they're walking through this meadow. You hear them muttering, I just want to do God's will. I just want to do God's will. I just want to do God's will. Now, they are walking through this meadow and they have their hands cupped out in front of them, okay, like I'm showing you here on YouTube. And in their hands, if it were possible, they're holding their own personal will. They're holding the will that they have. I just want to do God's will. I just want to do God's will. And they toss it in the air and it floats up to God. Now, all this time, God is listening, tears streaming down God's face, catches their will. All right. And as God is emoting, God is compressing their will, compressing it down to the size of a baseball. And then God rears back and throws a 90-mile-an-hour Nolan Ryan fastball, hits that individual walking in the meadow square in the forehead and says, then do something with the life I gave you. You are not a puppet on a string being manipulated by forces you do not understand. And it is best epitomized by a wonderful saying that I heard years ago. And you, Shunya, would probably know this. You're either pregnant or you're not. You cannot be a little pregnant. Ergo, you cannot be a little responsible for your life. You're either responsible or you're not. It's not. Now, I love what you said. When things go well, it was God and me. When things don't go so well, it was God and me. Because we're in this together. And you and I, we're in this together, right?
Yeah. And then the Vedas, the knowledge that I write about, challenge us to then find God in the sky, in the plants, in the trees, but then in your own being.
Yeah.
And that was tough when you're feeling like you've messed up, or you are, you don't have it together, or you're like royally not doing a good job. That's all I can say.
Now,
and then you're responsible for leading your lineage, and you're full of doubts and insecurity. And then the tradition you're teaching and studying, not teaching then, but studying, is about you're not only you are the sleeping God, goddess, supreme consciousness. More in terms of consciousness, like you've got a lot. You're not a little bit pregnant or not pregnant, you have complete freedom to create, maintain, and dissolute your life and write your script. And that was like way too much power that I could deal with. But then gradually I've grown into it, I've adulted,
Mm-hmm.
and I have understood that even when I'm feeling like really morbid, there's an experience of divinity there, and this accepting of my dark and light, and putting that on a divine, divine place within me has allowed me to explore the divine aspects of me plus the mystical experiences. So you can say that the distance between divinity and humanity has reduced in my being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know that we actually cannot in this world separate these two elements of self, that there's a physical, mortal, finite timeline of the physical body, but then there is that immortal, infinite timeline, if you will, or no timeline, of the essence that animates this physical body. Have you been able to uh, balance those two elements? And in your book, Sovereign Self, have you talked about that aspect of knowing that on the inside you are immortal, on the outside you're mortal, and that you need to connect with that inside in order to make the existence on the outside, I'm not sure if I want to say mean something. Um, People talk about leaving a legacy, for example. How long these interviews stay up on the internet and how long the internet survives after I'm gone, who knows? However, people will have heard these programs, just as people will have read your books. People will have listened to other interviews you have done and taken in that information, and then they will have disseminated it through their lives to others. And so, in a manner of speaking, you now leave that kind of a legacy, like the drop of water in a still pond and you see the ripples go out.
Absolutely. The sovereign self throughout weaves this quest for permanence in a realm of impermanence, or we look for what is imperishable in the realm that's perishable. But then I help people turn around and find that what they are craving for within, because without holding on to that inner certainty, that inner sense of what we call in Sanskrit nitya, that which continues, that which was there before you were in the body, that which is expressing itself through your body, that which shall outlive your body, that which is one with the mysteries of this universe and is one with the moon stars and the supreme being, then without that knowledge, we just become the role we are leading,
Yeah.
and we forget the soul that we are. And so part of the book is quite deep because it's like whispering in your ear. I'm like a soul whisperer, and I'm constantly reminding humanity, anybody who cares to read my book. Yes, these are teachings from the Vedas, but these are teachings from, my pen, my life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to assimilate. It's not like you're reading an ancient text. It's like you're reading my writings, but I'm clearly alluding to what I found to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I even have a chapter on how I was sitting in front of the death body of my favorite uncle who died at age 29, and I was hugging on to my mom. I and my sister were like shivering, and we were hugging on to my mom, and for a moment it felt like I was really safe, except that my mom died next year, and then my sister soon thereafter.
Oh my
So
goodness.
then I was all alone, shaking. Where do I go? Until I found all of them through a connection with something immortal.
Mm.
And there I found, and actually all these early deaths that I experienced in my life led me on a quest for the fear of mortality and the fear of death and the fear of loss did hound me for a while there, Richard, because I
Mm.
experienced all this at a very young age just one after another, circumstantial, the curveballs that God throws our way,
Yeah.
to ultimately help us find that the tennis ball of will is as big as this whole planet, and that I could determine my way and find like very deep resolution and peace, very deep, so
Mm.
deep that I lose words to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, I also know too that regardless of what language it is, a lot is lost in translation. And I think, and for example, I think of telepathy, and when we are able to telepathically transmit between ourselves and others, there will be nothing lost in translation, because I think it's going to be made up more of images and feelings rather than words, because words really are incomplete. And we all have the same emotions. We all experience the same emotions. What's different is our stories. Is, for example, when you use the wonderful, I love the phrase you used. You started to experience and utilize some of these great ancient wisdom teachings in your life's laboratory, which I think is great. I love that. It's I think it's wonderful, because in a laboratory, you're experimenting, and it isn't about getting it right. It's about learning through those experiments. I'm wondering the difference between success and failure. I know we're in a dualistic world, but in the reality of the grand scheme of things, there is no success and there is no failure. There's just learning, right?
Right, absolutely right. This, I feel like this planet that we're on is like a school for us,
Mm-hmm.
and and darkness and light, and in some sense, good teachers and false teachers are teaching us something, and
Yes.
that good and false lives within us too, and it's all teaching us.
Yeah.
It's a little more comfortable to learn from light and a little more cruel to learn from darkness. But gosh, darkness is a teacher, all right, and
It
teaches
is.
lasting lessons once we emerge from it. And the Vedas say that you may not emerge from it in one lifetime, but you may have more stories. And that's why there are some people who are like a little Buddha at age 2, because
Oh yeah.
they've been through the darkness. They've gone to those pubs and died there in alcohol stupor in the drains. They've done it all, and now they're born the little Buddha.
Yeah.
But so life teaches us, and if we did nothing, we're still held, and we are held through this polarity to keep on emerging. So
Mm.
nobody is really lost. That's the good, hopeful news. And we're not losing time if we're not moving forward based on society's version of what it means to move forward.
That's a very good point. I think that we could all take a lesson from that alone. That there is no wasted time. That whatever it is that you are doing is part of what you need to be doing for you right now. If that means resting and doing nothing, then rest and do nothing. And maybe spend some time going within, especially during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, as we've been promoting here on this program. I can't emphasize that enough, how important that is. I actually found myself, and especially when I'm working alone, but I did experience it when I was working with the two other gentlemen that helped me to build my wife's greenhouse. Um, I just felt the flow. I felt the wisdom, as it were, that, okay, yes, we had the printed instructions, and here it is in the material world. They're not making a lot of sense. We gotta play with this for a while, and we would, and eventually we would either figure it out, or we would say, you know what, the end result is what's so important in this instance. Does it really matter if we strap the walls together with big bands or lag bolts or nails or screws or whatever it is that we choose, so that this greenhouse functions in the manner that we want it to, so that we can then go to the next level and start growing our own vegetables and so on and so forth, that will then sustain us. And I have to tell you, in that regard, we had a 4x8 garden box out in the yard long before this greenhouse, and she planted squash. And she was making dinner one evening, and the crops were coming up and ready to harvest. She said, "Would you go out to the garden and pick me a squash?" And I said, "Sure." All right. So I went out there and I broke it off, took it in. "Would you go get me another? I need one more." I said, "Okay." So I go back out and I get another one, break it off, take it in. And I have to tell you, there is such a profound feeling of, I don't know, joy, of completeness in that I am gathering from the ground, from Mother Earth, something that she has nurtured for several months, that she has made available for us to nurture us, in turn to continue moving forward while listening to the wisdom, while listening to the still small. I mean, it's just a never-ending cycle. And there was just something about that was just so cool.
Just those images evoked a sense of peace.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can hardly wait for the crops to start coming in. I know she's planning some things that won't bear fruit according to the instructions, for 2 years. Okay, I'm willing to wait because it's going to be good. I will share this last item here. When we had the greenhouse back in Phoenix, she planted and grew strawberries. And of course, when you'd go into this greenhouse, the air smelled so much different. Oh my God, it was like, it was sweet and had nothing to do with the strawberries. But when we went to pick a strawberry off of the vine and eat it straight off the vine, I kid you not, it was like eating strawberry jam. It was already sweet and delicious. So, like I said, I can hardly wait to partake of what she's going to be growing there. Acharya Shunya is my guest here on the program. Sovereign Self, claim your inner joy and freedom with the empowering wisdom of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. Wisdom. I know this sounds, maybe the question has already been answered on the program. Is it wisdom if it is written down? I've heard it said, now this was more about truth, that truth is only truth, and I'll use the word wisdom, is only wisdom until it's written down, because then people start to dissect it and define it and create a doctrine and dogma over it. What are your thoughts in that regard?
It's interesting you say that, because the Vedas were orally transmitted for thousands of years. And probably they have been written and on palm leaves, and now they're available on, by the press of a button on online shopping carts, and then you can just buy them. Shopping platforms. I think when they were orally transmitted, they were transmitted more carefully, from one pure master to a pure disciple, and there was we don't have history of pop gurudom and all of that stuff. Just real people trying to lead a more conscious life. And probably by them being written, they become subject to interpretation, misinterpretation, dilution, appropriation, all kinds of things. And probably that's why one of my desires has been, and there's a lot of like borrowing from the Vedas and not giving credit to, that happens too. So I wanted to like write a book that's authentic, but it's always pointing out like this. I've always pointed out what knowledge arose within my soul, kind of in my own laboratory, and what part of it has been taken from the Bhagavad Gita and then contemplated and put together, like repackaged. And, there is always that fear of dogma or inauthenticity entering some of this. And that's why some of the teachings from India are sometimes more like magic or spell, or here's a mantra that's going to fix you. And I wanted to point out that really this knowledge is psychology based. It's based on consciousness. It's based on human existential potential to go beyond our own beliefs and our own delusions. So probably it's the first book of its kind in the Western media that goes into details and brings something useful for people. And yoga is not just physically standing on your head, but yoga is actually a psychological journey from our own shadow to our own light. And the body postures are only part of it that have become so big. Now yoga means twisting and turning, but yoga always meant a union with what is divine within you. And you do that through looking at your own thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, and sifting through to come up with what is eternal and real versus the ephemeral and the glamorous but not true. And so this is definitely a much more humble but honest endeavor to represent the teachings from my tradition in an honest light. They really deserve better showcasing. I'm not saying I'm the only teacher who's done it. I'm fortunately surrounded by both Indian and Western colleagues who are doing a good job, and my book is one of those.
Mm.
Just like you are trying to on your show to bring and highlight the Christian tradition as an inner path, and the inner work, along with not necessarily judging what others are doing, but here is another way to look at it, or here is an authentic way to understand. I think there is a movement worldwide now where Buddhist scholars, Hindu scholars, Christian scholars, Zen scholars, we're all trying to like find that universal hope for humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and not throw the baby with the bathwater, and things like that, and really like find something beautiful and eternal.
Yeah. Your book is available via Audible as opposed to, in
It's
addition
soon
to
going to be available via
soon.
Audible. We're not done yet with we're talking about it, but we're not there yet. But it's just only been recently released on as a hardcover,
Mm-hmm.
and it's available in every bookstore that you can think of, online and on site. If you can pick it up, yeah.
Acharya Shunya, the author of Sovereign Self, once again. It is claiming your inner joy and freedom with the empowering wisdom of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. I've actually tried reading a little of each of those, and I think that's one of those situations where you just take a little and set it down and ponder that for a while, and then take a little more and a little more, because sometimes it can be daunting, whether you're holding the book in your hand or whether you are listening to it, because it is also available audibly. It's recorded, because much of the language, if you will, it's kind of like listening to Shakespeare. You have to listen to it a number of times to really get the context of everything. But I tell you what, it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program and for coming back a second time. I love our conversations, and I'm hoping that we can do this again. We can continue this conversation throughout, not just this year, this decade, and so forth, because you have so much richness in your lineage, in your history, in your background, in your life, in the work that you are doing. You also have courses. You have courses that you teach online. Is that correct?
That's right. I teach Ayurveda yoga courses and non-dual wisdom courses based on sovereign self. Keeps me busy and happy.
You
Yeah.
have one in particular area here in regards to courses that's labeled, and I'd love for you to talk just a little about this before we wrap up. Free stuff. People love free stuff. Tell us a little bit about what they can find on your website, acharyashunya.com, where they can begin the learning process and then move on to getting into some of these courses that you teach.
Yeah, the free stuff are sharings from my heart. Like you'll find a booklet on using the humble garden rose for your beauty. You can drink it, you can apply it. So I have remedies and recipes there from my lineage. I have some teachings from Bhagavad Gita that you can pick up, some video CD series that you can sign up for. If you ever wondered what the Bhagavad Gita is about, then I share its first and second chapter. And the second chapter kind of gives um, a full bird's eye view of the entire Gita, actually.
Mm.
So you're good with that. And I have shared, meditations and audios and all kinds of things, very popular. You can start with that. And if it's hard to spell my name, you can also go to awakenedself.com. That will also lead you to the same website.
There you
Thank
go.
you, Richard, for being such a wonderful and listener, and your inputs like really led the conversation further.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
I thank you for those kind words. I thank you for sharing with us here on the program. This is Tell Me Your Story. And again, a reminder, you can go to her website. We will be linked to that website so that you can continue your evolutionary and transformational process, folks. Sovereign Self, once again, is the title of the book. Claim your inner joy and freedom with the powerful wisdoms of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. And again, Shunya has been my guest here on the program. We encourage you to go to her websites. And Awakened Self is the easy one, awakenedself.com. acharyashunya.com. Not as easy, but again, we're going to be linked and it'll get you there. That link will get you there. All you have to do is go to richarddugan.com or on SoundCloud as you're listening to the interview and you click on her name and so forth, it will take you to her website. We have that set up so that that's what that does. I have 3 questions. I know that I asked you these 3 questions the last time we talked, but what I found is sometimes the answers change over time. And I'm going to ask those questions of you. Before I do, a reminder to our listeners. First of all, thank you for listening and watching on YouTube, as well as listening on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and many other outlets, as well as richarddugan.com. And also listening at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Sundays and 1 a.m. Monday mornings on this fine station. And we hope that you will participate in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. We also hope that if you can support us financially, we would greatly appreciate that. We have a PayPal and Patreon account for your security as well as ours. And I have to tell you, I am always very grateful. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm even astonished at, oh my gosh, I just got an email from PayPal. You have a contribution. Wow. Thank you. Because I know for a lot of folks, money is hard to come by. I know the feeling, but I'm also ever so grateful for those who do support. And so a thank you to those who have supported us. And a thank you to those who will. We'll take energetic support. Send that our way. We will put it to good use. I promise you. For the final 3 questions that I love asking my guests each time, usually it's a surprise to them. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, who is Shunya?
A being who is happy and content with who she is.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
People come back and find peace within themselves, and this angst that they feel all the time goes away, and they can enjoy the rest of their time on the planet.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
To teach and to live the teaching myself.
Once again, I thank you so much, Acharya Shunya, for joining us here on the program. And I share with you namaste. I also share that with our listeners and viewers. I hope that you will join us again on our next broadcast podcast. videocast for Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love.